Hello, my extravagant art sluts. You're listening to Artgasm, the podcast all about the intersections of art and sexuality, and I'm your host, Allison Moon. I am so delighted that you are joining me here in the year of 2019. Can you believe we survived 2018? Well, some of us didn't, but most of us are here, and I'm very pleased that we are here together to face this brave new year of, I'm sure, more chaos, more beauty, more challenges, and just more of all of the stuff we've been dealing with up until this point. On today's episode, we are talking about men. Sexy men, beautiful men, naked men, masculine sexuality, and nude portrayals thereof. And I'm super excited because my guest is Alexandra Rubenstein. She is an amazing painter that came to some renown for a series of Cunnilingus portraits of famous men performing Cunnilingus. And they're all from the perspective of the person receiving the Cunnilingus. So it's very much clearly examination of the female gaze. And so I get to talk to Alexandra all about her appreciation for masculinity and at the same time the challenges that come up when you are a heterosexual woman who loves men when you live in a patriarchal society. And so Alexandra does beautiful things to grapple with that herself through her work, and we get to talk all about that in the interview. Before we get to that, I have a couple of announcements and then a little bit of a introduction to kick off the new year. So first of all, I've got a couple of gigs coming up in this new year. And the first one I'm super excited about. I'm going to be at San Francisco's Sketchfest, and I'm going to be a guest on Moshe Kasher's Hound Tall podcast. It is a really amazing show. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast, but doing the live ones is super exciting. The theme is how to be good at sex. And so it's Moshe Kasher, Michael Ian Black, Andy Kindler, Natasha Muse, and Aparna Nancherla. And I'm the guest expert talking about how to be good at sex. And I am feeling a little outclassed because I've been in awe of these comedians. This lineup is just absolutely stellar. I think Aparna is one of the funniest people I've ever seen on Twitter. I've been following her for years and years, and whenever she comes up on my feed, I just find her absolutely delightful. And so I'm super excited to be part of Sketchfest this year. Tickets are still available. If you're in the Bay Area, I definitely recommend, you could spend all of the money that you made in 2018 on Sketchfest. There's so many events. But this one's on Saturday, January 26th. That's actually the last weekend of Sketchfest. And it's in the afternoon. It's at 4 p.m. So it's kind of a nice little chunk of time there, so you can kind of pop in and then go out for dinner afterwards and then go to an evening show. But come see that show. I'm super excited. Having Artgasm listeners in the audience will probably help me feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit less outclassed. But I think it's going to be a really funny, fun show. Also, when I'm in the Bay Area, I will be conducting more interviews for this podcast. If you have a Bay Area artist in mind that you would love to hear interviewed, let me know. Hit me up, email me. Even if you don't know them personally, let me know where I can find their work and check it out. I'm going to be doing more interviews. I have some scheduled already, but I'm always looking for more amazing artists. And this actually goes for artists around the country and even around the world. If you have somebody who you think would be amazing for Artgasm, just let me know. Hit me up. I'm always looking to expand my community. I'm always looking to meet new amazing people who are making cool things in the world around sexuality, gender, kink, and art. So yeah, reach out to me. Let me know. So hopefully that when I'm in those cities, I can interview them, or sometimes we can even do long distance interviews. Again, you can always reach me at artgasmcast@gmail.com. And speaking of gigs, I'm planning my year now. I usually like to kind of have things handled in January for almost my entire year. So I'm going to be going back to New York. I'm going to be probably in Chicago. I'm going to be hopefully in the Southeast, maybe in Atlanta. But this kind of is for you, the listener, to know that because I am a freelancer, I tend to travel where people bring me. So oftentimes I'll do university gigs for Sex Weeks, for instance. And when I'm in various places for things like Sex Weeks, I will then teach other gigs around town. So this is an opportunity for university students to bring me in, but it's also an opportunity for people in various cities where I might not necessarily go to figure out a way to bring me to those areas. For instance, I've taught in Nashville and I've taught in Knoxville and I've taught in a lot of different cities that wouldn't necessarily have a huge sex positive culture, but because I get brought up by universities, I can then teach. So this is an invitation for you to invite me. So if you are a university student, if you're involved with your like sex education community, if you're involved in your arts or writing programs, I have a whole list of workshops that I teach at universities. Some of them are writing focused, some of them are sex ed and relationship focused. And so I think it's really just fun. I can teach self-publishing, all sorts of cool things. So you can learn more about that by going to girlsex101.com or alliedmoon.com. Those are my two websites. Allied is ALLIEDMOON.com. So if you want to bring me into town, check it out, reach out to me. I'm definitely planning my schedule and I would love to have more opportunities to travel in this new year. Speaking of New Year's. So I make the same resolution every year. I don't believe in resolutions as goals. I believe in resolutions as a way to commit or recommit to value systems. So the way that I think about that is that I have the same resolution that I started in 2016 and I like to check in on myself with. And so I'm going to share with you what I had written in 2016. And I'm going to recommit to it now and invite you to kind of consider as well how these resolutions might relate to your own life. I think it has a lot to do with art, and I think it has a lot to do with expression. So here's my New Year's resolution. In 2019, I will resist reacting to the reaction. I won't pretend I have informed opinions when I'm merely quoting a think piece, responding to something that I know little about. I won't form opinions about art or events before I experience them firsthand. I will read fewer think pieces. I will read more primary sources. I won't say cynical things just to feel clever. I won't shame or mock people for trying. I will resist artistic critique that is just thinly veiled gossip. I will resist the outrage factory. I won't participate in public shaming. Some of these will be easy for me, others will be quite hard, but it all feels worth committing to. So I wrote that back in 2015, and every year I've recommitted to that. And so just to break it down, I will resist reacting to the reaction. This is when people often will read either think pieces or like film reviews, for instance, and they'll say, oh, I'm not going to go see that movie because I heard that blank. And this is often quoting like entertainment gossip pieces or it's fine to not participate in consumption of media because of your value system. I'm not saying that like we should all see Johnny Depp movies, right? Like I think that it's totally fine to decide to withhold your money and your time from things that you don't believe in. However, I've often seen this kind of reacting to the reaction used to denigrate artworks that really people know nothing about. It'll be kind of this rumor mill of like, well, I heard that this person said about this set. And without any actual facts, I think that this is often just basically macro level gossip in order to discredit creative projects. And I think that that's just gross. I won't pretend to have an informed opinion when I'm merely quoting a think piece or a headline, for instance. A lot of people just don't read anymore. And so they'll quote things based on, somebody else's opinion, kind of third, fourth hand stuff. I won't form opinions about art or events before I experience them. That's just my personal value. For instance, I will not talk about the 50 Shades of Grey movies because I have not seen the 50 Shades of Grey movies. It's very hip in my sex education community to denigrate the movies or the books without actually having read or seen them. And I'm not going to do that. Other people can, and that's their choice, but I choose not to do that. Will read fewer think pieces. I was really good at this past year. I just found myself ignoring most think pieces, and that felt really good. Primary sources, I've been trying to do that. It's been hard. Obviously, the news cycle is such that it's been really hard, but I'm continuing to dedicate myself to reviewing primary sources. I won't say cynical things just to feel clever. I think I do a good job of that. I could probably do better. I don't know for sure, but I have found myself kind of getting allergic to my own cynicism in such a way where when I feel it happening, I kind of tamp it down real fast. And I'm continuing to do that. I won't shame or mock people for trying. Same thing. I think I really believe, I see it happen on the internet all the time. And I have enough privilege and I have enough patience in my life to be able to be patient with people who are trying. And I think that's important value to me as well. I will resist artistic critique that is just thinly veiled gossip. That doesn't happen very often, but yeah. I will resist the outrage factory. This is hard, obviously. What I've done to do that is I've stopped using Facebook. I've really pulled back on my use of Twitter. And I don't follow people who just drag people for fun. And I will even block people who I just see dragging people for fun. I think it's really gross and really not okay. And so I choose not to participate in that. I won't participate in public shaming. This is hard because my partner was encountering a situation this past year that I talked about a little bit on Kevin Allison's episode, this last episode, where there was a lot of piling on of internet factions. And I had to sit on my hands and bite my tongue because I could not speak about this stuff. And that was really, really hard. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important. I think public shaming is often this, again, just basically gossip taken to a toxic level where we hear something second or third hand, and then we just kind of pile on. And it doesn't matter how people are trying. It doesn't matter how people are changing. It doesn't matter actually even what the facts are. What matters often is this mob mentality that I just choose to resist completely. And this is within my own community, but this is also when I see random people dragging other random people. And even at, again, like this idea of macro level, we have this notion that like if you're famous or rich, then it's open season on you to be dragged. And I have a really hard time with that because again, like we see these people that, yes, they're making lots of money and maybe we're jealous of their money and their power and their access. That doesn't necessarily mean it's okay to tag people on Twitter and then drag them. I think that, we have to remember that we're all human beings, even if you are an A-list actor or even if you are a $1 million director. I think it's really important that we acknowledge the humanity of all of us and we don't just drag because it feels good. So that's kind of my commitment to this year. I will probably get even better at it this year. I might fail in some places, but I encourage you to consider your own value systems and how you can kind of walk your talk a little bit more, particularly when it comes to creative expression and supporting your peers and supporting your community and raising all of us up. I am a very strong believer in that it's better to make a friend than an enemy, and it's better to see people as collaborators rather than competitors. And I think that this is something that in the art world, for sure, but in a lot of different fields, I think humans have a really hard time with. Our instinct is to see people as competitors, but in sex education particularly, this is not a giant business. A lot of us are working other jobs. A lot of us are living month to month. And this idea that we're all living large is just a complete myth. And I think that that's a real big issue with this notion that some people are, if you have any sort of level of fame, that comes with a paycheck, which is not at all the case. Maybe one or two people in this whole industry are doing that, and you know them because they're on TV, they're on MSNBC as talking heads. But most of us, we're going to colleges, we're getting paid $200 to speak at a workshop. We're not making giant money. I think it's really important for us to start seeing everyone in the arts, everyone in creative fields, to the degree that we can as potential friends and collaborators rather than enemies and competitors. So that's just another value that I'm going to be trying to commit to even harder this year. If you have a resolution that has anything to do with art and creativity or your existence in the world, I would love to hear about it. You can always send me a tweet at @HeyAllieMoon. You can just tweet and you can hashtag ArtgasmCast because I'll see it that way. You can email me even and just kind of let me know. Other social media things, like I said, I've been pulling way back from Facebook. I'm on Twitter, but I try not to read too much. I try not to scroll too much. But I am on Instagram, which, is gross because it is a Facebook company. But I do find that it's one of the few social media sites where I see a lot of joy. I see a lot of my friends being wonderful. I see a lot of artists making art, which is kind of the point for me of social media. I want to be able to see and support my friends making cool things and living cool lives. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Allison_Moon. So it's ALLISON_Moon. And new episodes get teased there as well. So if you want to follow me there, you'll see as soon as a new episode drops. All right, so let's move on to the interview, shall we? So Alexandra Rubenstein, I mentioned her work on an earlier podcast because she does a lot of different cool portraits, but her series that kind of was her claim to fame was a series of famous men performing cunnilingus from the perspective of the person receiving cunnilingus. And they're very cheeky, and some of them are very just laugh out loud funny, and some of them are actually very sexy. But it was an interesting challenge for me to look at these and be like, ooh, gosh, did Justin Bieber really consent to having his picture used in that way, right? And so Alexandra and I do talk about that. We also talk about the difference between Russian sex negativity and American sex negativity. We talk a lot about masculine sexuality and the female gaze. And I'm really excited to offer you this interview. I had a delightful time meeting with her in her Brooklyn studio. Again, as is often the case, I'm meeting these people where I do these interviews are in apartments or they're in studios. And oftentimes I cannot control the noise of the environment. So what you're going to hear probably a couple of times during this interview is a loud HVAC system turning on and off. And it's because Alexandra's studio is in a beautiful studio space that she shares with a lot of different artists. There's noise that happens because we could not control the AC units in the large Brooklyn studio space. So you're going to hear some whooshing sounds here and there and some humming sounds. And just imagine that you are in the studio with us, smelling the linseed oil and enjoying the sights. And you'll enjoy that a lot more. All right. Enjoy my interview with Alexandra Rubenstein. Hi. Thanks so much for having me in your studio. It's really a treat to be in a studio because I feel like so many of the people I talk to are artists in different ways where they don't have like displays of their work around. So it's kind of nice to be sitting in front of all of your peoples.
I'm glad. Yeah, no, I think it's probably really useful to just see an environment in which a person works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And the Gowanus Open Studios were a few weeks back, so it's pretty organized in here. So I'm happy to have people over until it goes to shit.
Yeah, you're like, it's clean, come over, see how well I live.
see how clean I am, yeah. Tell my mom. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I mean, I found your work because you kind of went viral a little while ago.
A couple of years back, yeah.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was cool.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things as an artist is getting enough attention.
Yeah.
As an artist, of course. Mm-hmm. But also, I think it's really nice to have an audience. And so it was really good in that way to just finally feel like a lot of people saw my work in a new way, which is really interesting too. So I think it's like, I really enjoyed getting a broader audience and getting broader feedback and making some sales. That was nice too.
Did you find you're kind of encountering a whole new client base because people were reading you in Cosmo as opposed to,
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like a very different audience. And I think I'm still kind of interested in that a lot is, there's like the fine art world, but then there's also a more commercial, broader world. And I think it's kind of... for me personally, it's interesting to see where I have more of an audience and how different people connect to my work. Yeah,
so the series that we're talking about right now was it just like the celebrities performing Cunnilingus series that did it for you, or did you go viral earlier?
No, I think that was the one that really took off on the internet. And I think another series that year that I more connected to also got some good write-ups. The series called Thirsty. I think I have one of the pieces over there.
Oh, okay.
Where I use men to decorate wall-mounted bottle openers.
Are the bottle openers always over their dicks?
In that specific series, yes.
Awesome.
Censored myself. And then,
That's interesting. So with like when you were talking about kind of finding a new audience because of going kind of more popular, like your work is this really interesting mix of kind of cheeky and fun and goofy pop plus like really fine art technique.
Yeah.
So do you find that like who is your client?
I think it's a range. I think that specific series was probably a little more relatable to a broader audience because of the celebrity factor, which I think is a conscious choice to use celebrity in that way. I mean, a lot of my work references pop culture and especially American media, and so I think that was on purpose, and I'm glad like it kind of it was a good way to connect to people that wouldn't normally be looking at art. So I do have that audience, I guess, now, but then I think I also do have a lot of like art references within my work, and I understand the context of my work historically, but I think maybe sometimes my work does tend to be less serious in some ways. Like, I mean, the concepts are serious and the ideas are, but I really love to keep it light too. And I think part of the reason I do use like graphic subject matter and sexuality in my work is it's not about sexuality. It's kind of using it as a way to connect to people, but it's also like as humor, because I think sex is funny and I think it's personal and intimate, and I think it brings the lightness to the work. So what my audience is, I don't know. I mean, I think it's broad, and I think maybe my subject matter can be alienating for a traditional art crowd as well, especially older people. But I think it's interesting to see gender-wise the response I get, because I actually think a lot of the negative responses tend to come from women more so than men.
Wow.
Because I think men will just like anything graphic. Just, you know what I mean? Like they don't need anything more. To generalize, but I think women are a little more put off if it's too forward and graphic, and I think that's interesting, and that's kind of part of the idea as well, is that women are so kind of uncomfortable still acknowledging themselves as not ladylike beings, I guess. Not, you know what I mean? The notion of like, I can't enjoy this kind of humor or something, and and that's part of the work for me.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's like, I mean, what I love about that specific series, the Cunnilingus one, is that it's about the female gaze, like literally, like you're looking at down at the person performing Cunnilingus as though you are the woman receiving it. And that's, I mean, that is very edgy, but it's kind of fantastic because you just kind of, you get the landscape of the woman's body, but then you get the point of view that hopefully many of us are very familiar with, of looking down upon a lover. Yeah. And so in the serious context of it, it's like you really are just flipping this, historical gaze into just truly a female one.
Just presenting a very clear female perspective. Yeah, and I think, I think that's something I'm very interested in, trying to communicate more, I guess, to my audience, but without censoring myself. Because I think I'm painting what I'm thinking and feeling and want to paint, and I don't overthink that part of it. But I think we all want to connect to as many people as possible. And and all of my work is kind of made with a very specific female perspective, and it's interesting to me when it's not resonating with heterosexual women the way I'm hoping it would. But it usually, with that audience, it can start a conversation that goes somewhere. So I'm not like, I think that's part of the idea, is that women are still so kind of, this perspective is so internalized that I want to explore that.
You did similar, I'm not sure if it's a series or just individual pieces of kind of the same gaze, but with the female body kind of obscured by other materials and non-famous faces, I believe. Is that right? Did you get similar responses to those?
I mean, that series wasn't as popular. I think people definitely had an easier time with it because it was less graphic. And it was more kind of like an exploration that led up to the celebrity series. I think it was kind of just me playing around. And I did this series when I was in college. That was kind of the reverse. It was paintings of both women and men sucking dick with the guy whose dick it was abstracted and like it was kind of like a color background, I guess. So it was censored. And yeah, I mean, this was like over 10 years ago now, so it was kind of not over. I'm aging myself. Less than 10 years ago, but yeah, it was. I think at the time I didn't have the language to understand why I was making the work I was making. So and then I started thinking about it as I grew up, being like, why was I interested in that? And I'm like, why am I painting people sucking dick like that? We've already seen that way too much. Done, you know? Because it was like, that's like a very kind of a clear audience for that, like, and that's not the audience I want to appeal to. So yeah,
and it's interesting about, again, the celebrity ones. It's like there's an earnestness to it, but because of like the faces that you choose, it's not like it's not so much that it seems like you're imagining what these men would look like in real life. Like the Bowie portrait, for instance, is Ziggy, like in the pose that we know of Ziggy. So it's kind of like it does kind of take it from the realistic to the fantasy and the fantastical quite quickly. Yeah, I mean, I almost just thought of it as like this. Painting celebrated men in like a celebrated way, like framing them with this beautiful thing. So it's putting both of the things on the pedestal, kind of. Nice. Which is why I hate anytime anyone suggests I paint any negative men, because that's, why would I want them anywhere near a woman? Oh, you know, I don't. Yeah, so it's about like celebrating. You know, it started out with sort of a more. My day job was always in post production, so. That's kind of, I was kind of exploring that, you know, I did a previous series looking for Mr. Good Sex, which was taking stills from vintage porn of women's faces, and then I think I was just so drawn to that, but I just started questioning how I was never seeing a literal female perspective. Everything was done from a male's perspective for the men, and
then I was like, oh, it'd be fun to just create my own alternative reality. And so then like the first few paintings, if you look at them, they were kind of more natural. Kind of, I would find shots of celebrities like eating or something.
Yeah.
So it looked a little more realistic. But then I kind of like this idea of like these glamour shots, almost like headshots of, literally headshots of these guys. And I
think the Justin Bieber one I'm like, I feel like I've seen that picture before.
Yeah, like it was just like funnier and goofier, which I liked. And that's just how that's evolved. And then it just kind of became more and more conceptual for me.
That's interesting. Yeah, so I definitely, when I first saw them, I actually did feel uneasy too, but not because of Cunnilingus or the graphicness of them. I felt uneasy because these were like real people. These were real, recognizable people. And I think it raised my own issues with celebrity and how uncomfortable I was like looking at a real person who may not have consented to be portrayed in that way. And I was wondering, is that something that you grappled with or came up with?
That's interesting because I personally never grappled with that. I guess but I mean that's across the board for me. I'm like, men's consent. Why would I worry about that? But like that's probably something I should think about. But a lot of other people have. That has been one of the negative criticisms, the consent. But to me, that's it's context. I think how many times have women been presented in a way that they didn't provide consent?
Sure,
that it's just you just can't compare the two because. Yeah, you kind of give up a part of yourself with a celebrity, but there's always going to be the gender aspect to it. Like, men just have more power. It's like they're not objectified ever. Like, it just carries so much less weight for them. Their careers are not brought down as they're sexually objectified in that way, you know? Like, their sex tapes are not controversial. Like, it's, and that's part of it, is that we're just not used to seeing men in any sort of a compromised, vulnerable position, and it's not viewed that way. Like, I think most of those men... If they ever saw the portraits, they wouldn't be offended by this.
Right. Have you gotten any feedback from...
Fortunately, no.
Okay.
But one day...
I'm really curious. I'd be really curious to hear. Yeah, I mean, I think what again, like, this could also speak to, like, what you're saying. There's the element of, like, potential, like... If you... how you see Cunnilingus is how you might see the portraits, right? Like, if you think that to perform Cunnilingus is humiliating... then you might see this as, you know, an offensive portrayal. But if you see it as an exaltation, this is like a beautiful, like, hey, John Hamm's probably really good at eating pussy, and we should all be so proud.
Exactly. It's a celebration,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think, like, the Obama one had a lot more kind of, why would you do this to, like, our leader, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, this is not a negative thing. I'm celebrating him. So, I mean, it started a lot of conversations with women and stuff, which I think are useful. Again, I think men tend to be a little more simple about it. They're either into it or they're not, you know? So.
Well, it is. I mean, again, like, it's very aesthetically pleasing. Like, you're a very good painter. So the lighting is beautiful, the forms are beautiful, the arrangements are beautiful, and there's just often a cheeky or sexy element to it as well.
Yeah.
Which is, it makes it a lot, it takes it from, like, the idea of porn being, like, kind of poorly lit and kind of just... weirdly framed to actually, like, there's an artistic element to it as well.
No, I mean, I think that's why I love painting so much, and, you know, it's kind of, it's just a fun medium to do the subject matter with, because it registers as art automatically in people's minds, you know. I do, like, obviously paint a lot and, like, spend a lot of time on it, so I think I like that confusion in people, like, this is art, you know, so...
That's cool. Yeah. And so for the series that you've done now with the bottle openers, did this come after?
I think they were kind of about the same time, and then I think the bottle openers, they just kind of did a whole series, and then the Cunnilingus is a little more ongoing. Like, I still have some pieces I'll do I'm still working on them. It's kind of an ongoing thing that kind of evolves conceptually for me.
Oh, okay.
And the bottle openers are also a couple years old, that series, and then currently I'm working on these guys, going to the male nude again, and just kind of, you know, a lot of my work I do pull from found imagery, because I kind of like to give viewers, like, something a little familiar, so they have a little more context for the work, and kind of reflecting our media and culture back to us. But I think with this series I'm kind of exploring more of creating my own content and my own setups. And
Okay.
Bringing men in here and having them pose for me, and exploring that whole relationship between artist and their model, and in the historical context as well, because I think it's such a problematic history of a very male-dominated field and a very kind of imbalanced relationship between the artist and the model.
Yeah.
Historically, and just seeing again how that pans out for me as a female artist today.
I mean, it does feel, and I'm not a painter, so I could be completely wrong, but it does feel almost like the idea of having a model in your studio sitting for you for hours at a time does feel kind of like a relic. It doesn't seem like a lot of people paint that way anymore.
I don't paint that way.
Yeah.
No, I photograph them. I bring them in, I photograph them, and then I work from photographs, because that's my painting style, and then, but it's an interesting experience, just even finding men to pose for me that are comfortable in this posing nude, that are not going to creep me out, that are not eroticizing the situation, that can just see it as art, that are comfortable with themselves naked and flaccid. I think that's an interesting challenge.
Interesting, yeah.
And I think it's... I don't see a lot of women painting men, so I think it's... I don't know why, so I want to do it.
Yeah. Well, so the two paintings that we're looking at here that are kind of the series, are these found painting pictures, or are these your friends?
These are my guys that I'm bringing in here, and then photographing and painting. And,
They're lovely, and I mean, it keeps all of the same elements that are so great from the Cunnilingus shots of like really beautiful lighting, really beautiful framing, really beautiful posing. But it kind of removes the cheekiness and just kind of presents these beautiful men in relaxed kind of like we can objectify and appreciate their beauty. It's nice. They're really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I've just started this year, so I'm going to see kind of where it goes. But I think I'm just kind of looking at the historical approach to the female nude and how they were depicted and how masculinity was depicted. I think I'm just very kind of interested in masculinity in America, and I think that's kind of, again, I'm kind of seeing what I see out there, and I think so many female artists, or I really hate that label, female artists. I think it's just artists, right? But I think so many of the figurative work I'm seeing, you're dealing with these kind of ideas about our own experience through either self-portraiture or depiction of female bodies, and that's totally fine, and I understand that kind of that thinking. I think just for me, I'm more interested in how I'm affected by masculinity, I guess, and to dive into therapy now. But it's, I think it's like what we're not looking at is that all of our experiences are not just affected by the way femininity is addressed in our culture and our country. I think it's a huge part of it is masculinity and like what is really that experience.
Right.
And I think with these two, I'm just kind of starting out. I'm really interested in this idea of the female traditionally presented as passive, like the female nude, kind of this. It's usually like, the tropes of femininity of like this. Either we have like the nymph who's like really threatening to the man, and who's like threatening them with their sexuality. That's like overhyped, and then or we have this passive nude female that's kind of doesn't have an active role, and it's just kind of all about sexuality, and it's just it's so kind of narrow, and I think especially like right now, I'm not sure where this passivity is coming from, because I think it's like we're never used to seeing men as passive, and they're incredibly passive, especially right now. It's like it's like I think it's like it's easy to be passive when your well-being isn't threatened constantly. So I think it's historically it's like the way masculinity is presented is very interesting too, and the censorship around male genitalia, or just the treatment of it as well. And so I think I'm kind of interested in depicting young men in the way that a straight woman sees it. I don't think we see that, because they're naked, but I'm also like I'm not trying to necessarily eroticize them.
Right.
I think it's not about that.
Yeah, it kind of raises an interesting thought for me, where it's like when we think about like the female form is kind of the female nude's always erotic, never not erotic, which is kind of a problem in culture, right? Just like a woman cannot be neutrally naked. Whereas with men, there is this, I mean, because of patriarchy, but also because of this like very important visual signifier, like are you erect or are you not? And if you're erect, then it's pornographic and we're allowed to gaze upon it sexually, but if you're not, then it's kind of a neutral body. And so seeing these men posing in like flaccid and relaxed and not, and at the same time like eyes closed looking away from the camera, it does kind of allow you to appreciate the aesthetic of a nude man, either erotic or non-erotic, but
it's just see them.
Yeah, and I think that, the idea of men being afraid to be seen when they're not at, like, their virility kind of thing, it's an interesting... It does make me feel like... I feel like a gentleness from both of these pictures, because they are kind of in a receptive space, and a relaxed space. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's not just women. I think it's nudity in general in this country. It's like... people are just incapable of not eroticizing everything that's naked, and we just happen to constantly be exposed to naked women, and I guess there's like just such an oversaturation of nude women, and I love nudity, but I'm just kind of like confused by why it's so imbalanced. I think a large part of it is kind of the culture of like slut shaming. I think in different ways. Like I think. Like making this work is a very conscious choice of subjecting myself to that judgment, and it sucks, and like I don't like that. But I think that's such a big part of the commentary I'm making is that I'm judged so much for just painting these things and these assumptions that it creates about me, and
like that these are your fantasies or your
okay,
interesting,
and that's and I think I think a lot of women deal with that in the arts as well, as like if you have any sort of sexual content in your work, even if it's funny, it's still kind of for some reason this assumption of that you're like you want to fuck or like you know what I mean. Basically, I don't know how else to like simplify.
I'm a sex educator, and so there's definitely the assumptions that like that's we're always DTF because this is what we do for a living.
And it's weird because it's so kind of far from me. But like, I think I guess I'm like so kind of angry about all those assumptions, you know? I think it's, I grew up, like I'm Russian, and I think like that, I've been here for 20 years, but I think that culture is so kind of narrow when it comes to the way it sees women as like only sex objects or mothers. And I think growing up with kind of, I mean, I definitely like just felt that was the value I had to contribute was like my looks and my body, but not in a way that benefited me in any ways. And I think I was just always kind of so angry at how unfair it was. That I think my work kind of became this kind of aggression against that of like, why can't I, if I'm going to be so heavily objectified, why can't I also be like making these jokes about sex? Why can't I also have that side?
Why can't you claim part of it for yourself?
Like, because I think it was kind of this rebellion of like, I'm not allowed to do this. This isn't ladylike. This is not like, you know, it's not okay. And then and I think that always kind of made me angry and mad, and that's really where my work is kind of, the graphicness of it is coming from. It's not coming because I'm down to fuck and I love sex. I think any healthy person does and should, and like, you know, so I think that's an assumption you should make about every person, not just me. But I think it's, you know, and some people get that and some don't. I think women usually get a little more than men because I think a lot of us have that experience of being prejudged.
Did you notice a difference in Russian versus American culture in that way?
I think Russian is just more blatant. I think American culture is a little more nuanced in its slut shaming.
Figure out new creative ways to slut shame.
No, totally. In all the things, and like they're both, you know. I think American culture definitely empowers women in more ways, for sure. Like I think, like on like a very basic level of like growing up with sports, like I feel like I always was envious of people that grew up playing sports. Like, I think it gives you, like, such a different source of confidence that, like, I wasn't really exposed to when I was young. And, like, or, like, even having to join the military in, like, Israel or something, or the Nordic countries, it's, like, I think it's, like, such a useful tool to just find your confidence from these other ways. Than just the generic traditional, like, your appearance, your likability, like traditionally feminine, like, kind of attributes that are valued. But yeah, I mean, I think American culture is incredibly slut-shaming and so kind of Puritan and hypocritical in the way it treats sex, and but Russians worse. We
are so similar in so many ways.
Yeah, no, I think like Russian culture is horrible when it comes to women. The way it, like, sees women, and not all of it, of course. It's like a broad brush, but yeah, to generalize, it's like that was my experience with it, and I felt it a lot, and I didn't like it.
Wow. Do you have any fans in Russia?
You know, yeah, I think I do. I mean, I think it's such an oppressive culture that I think it also has, like, a really strong arts, like, you know, the Pussy Riot group, like, that's, I mean, they're an art group, and I think there's just so much to be rebelling against there. So a lot of fuel, and so I feel like I'm always grateful for it too, because I think it's like this baggage is like where art comes from, you know. So it's good.
There's a group of women in Ukraine who are translating one of my books into Russian, and I just gave them the rights to do it, because it's like, do what you want to do. This is great, because they're just like, we really need more content around sex education, particularly queer sex education. I'm like, yep, can do. Take it, do whatever you want to with it. But yeah,
totally. No, it's crazy.
Yeah,
so behind.
Interesting. So back to these portraits that you're working on now. So one of the things that strikes me too is that, like, it could have been easy, I suppose, to kind of erase any sort of time context of, like, era, because like, but like, you could have made them as neutral as possible, removing tattoos. You know, you have one of them holding a Negro Modelo beer, so it's like it's very clearly, like, of the now. What about those kinds of cultural signifiers were interesting to you or important to you?
Yeah, again, I think I just I kind of love American culture, as problematic as it is. Like, I think it's like I still have this, like, rose goggles when it comes to it, and like I love, like, referencing like these little elements of our culture, and I also, like, I think my work is a lot about consumerism as well. Like, I think, like, and another reason for using sexuality is that, like, it's become just like a commodification, right? That's the word. And commodity, and then, like, I think we're over consuming so much. So the Modelo in this piece was I thought, well, this one's called The Great American Nude, so that was kind of like I like that reference, because it's nothing here is, like, really American, you know what I mean? And I think and I think, like, well, that one has all those elements of, like, a traditional white t-shirt, but then it's kind of like this Puritan kind of approach to nudity and vulnerability, but then I like the Modelo reference for that, because it's kind of this taking from other cultures, basically. That's part of America in good and bad ways. And I think this is another I think, like, traditionally the nudes, when it comes especially to the female nude, they were kind of more ambiguous about the identity of the model, right? So they didn't want to be too specific, but I think I kind of, like, love the specificity of the tattoos. Yeah. Because they give you, like, this kind of look into the personality without giving you too much, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so to have it's kind of a meta narrative. It's like to have skin marked that you are now representing on canvas is pretty interesting. If we consider tattoos to be kind of marks on canvas themselves. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think, especially those guys' tattoos, I just thought they were, like, really interesting to go with the context.
Yeah, they're kind of punk rock tattoos. They're not just kind of, you know, artsy.
Yeah, exactly. No, I actually made him put a jacket on too.
Oh, really?
So many tattoos. I was it's too distracting.
Nice.
Maybe I'll still paint them, but yeah.
That's interesting. And what's the background going to be for this?
It's just my studio, so it's just the studio. All we have. It's the space over here, and I just kind of I just like having them in my space. I think that's kind of, you know, I think the more paintings I kind of make in my space, you can kind of stitch them maybe together. So you could see that they're all kind of in the same space.
Yeah, you just have a room full of naked men at some point.
I wish, you know. Again, people are going to think I'm getting so much dick in life. Little do they know.
That's so funny. So speaking of, there's also, well, this piece is really cool too, because this reminds me of Le Monde, right?
Yeah, no, it's a very direct reference to the origin of the world painting. This is the origin of the world's problems.
Oh, is that what it's called?
That's what it's
Wow.
called. I know, I'm like...
Wow.
Every time I'm like writing artist statements for things now, I'm just like, and this is because men are the problem. Like conceptually they are. Like it's like the masculinity is the problem.
Yeah.
It's like what we think masculinity is. So again, I'm kind of interested in exploring that.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you feel like? Are you trying to represent like non-toxic masculinity in these portraits?
I just don't think it's simple. I think it's again, I kind of like these aspects of masculinity, like a leather jacket, like this toughness, like drinking beer. It's like, so I want to present both of the sides of like these superficial symbols of masculinity combined with these non-threatening, just regular guys, like naked and vulnerable and non-threatening in any way,
Yeah. It is kind of shocking just looking at your work and like how rare it is. I mean, I was just at the Met the other day, and it's like how rare it is to see just... I mean, once we get out of like Greek statuary, like how rare it is to see just nude men represented in paint
and by women.
Yeah.
And I think, I think there's men painting men. That's the only way I'm seeing it really, and that's interesting and curious. I mean, even I was like looking at the Alice Neal book for reference, and she only has 2 paintings of nude men.
Wow.
Throughout her whole body of work, which is fascinating. Like she's like one of the greatest female painters of the last like 100 years, and why?
Yeah.
And she's straight, and like but like why are we not looking at men?
Yeah. Just like just how subtly has this gotten into our subconscious that nude women are just normal and nude men are something weird and marked.
Or something like, I think that's another aspect of like, that's how you make it less threatening, right? Is like by just seeing it and exposing people to it. It's like, if we're used to seeing penises all the time, they're not going to have that weight. They're not going to have that power. Yeah. We're still not going to probably be exposed to them when we don't want to be, but like, I don't know. I think that demystifies it a little bit. And
well, as I've gotten older, as I've started sleeping with more men, really, like I've started appreciating the aesthetic of a man's body far more than I used to when I was 20. Totally. And so I certainly appreciate like being able to see my lover like in the morning, in the morning light, not in a sexual context, and just being able to appreciate the aesthetic of hair on their bodies, or just like muscle or smoothness or bellies, or all the things that are just part of a man's body, especially men's aging bodies. Like I've started to really like that more and be more attracted to the visual of it than I ever thought I would be as a young person.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely just appreciating men. And I think, again, like a lot of my work, it just kind of comes from my personal like kind of explorations and ideas, and I tend to objectify men, like not in any negative way, but I think it's like, I like beautiful men. I can't be the only one. Like, you know what I mean?
No, you're not the only one.
Like, and I'm just like, why can't we like talk about them that way? Like, and it's not a negative thing. It's just like, we already all love women's bodies. Like, done. But like, I'm done with that. Like, you know what I mean? I'm done looking at women. Like, I see like there's definitely a lot of value in it, but I'm also like, I want to see men too. Yeah. And and I think it's and they should also feel looked at like in good and bad ways, because it's the same. I think it's like this burden that most women experience of being looked at, like it's a double-edged sword. Like it's really hard growing up, realizing you're always going to be looked at a certain way, and I think it's unfair.
It is so weird. I mean, like, I'm just noticing as we're talking more these contradictions of like, men are both hyper visible and invisible, and women are hyper visible and invisible in these different ways, and for men to be on display posed as women creates this kind of dissonance just of like how rare it is, but also how lovely it is. And like so it's like I find myself, okay, like a passive pose isn't necessarily a disempowering pose, because they're still being, I don't know, I'm finding myself really kind of stuck in these interesting conundrums of how we approach gender and the way we objectify people.
Totally.
That's cool. So speaking of the objectification, one of the series that I also saw on your website that I thought was kind of mixing the cheekiness and the objectification was just like the pure like genital portraits that you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, like, sometimes, like, I just have a humor of, like, a 14-year-old boy. I'm, like, fine with it. Like, your genitals are funny, like, and I think it's, like, I just thought it was funny and goofy, and I wanted to do it, and, I don't actually think at that point I saw, Magritte's reference, like, he had made a couple of paintings of only women. Have you seen them? They're like faces with the genitals.
Yeah.
On the head, and that was kind of coming from simplifying women again, kind of that perspective. And I think mine is just about simplifying everybody, about like sexuality is light, like it doesn't have to be so heavy all the time.
Sure.
And yeah, everyone should just get a little more comfortable with nudity, and it's goofy. And, that was just kind of a fun light series.
Yeah, those are definitely, I recommend people checking those out because they're whimsical. And then you also, I did a series where you had mentioned you were using found images. It looked like it was vintage male porn.
Yeah. When I was doing the Thirsty series, it was came about when I discovered the Playgirls from the 70s. And, I have a few over here. They're just, I love the aesthetic. I think I've always just been drawn to images from the 70s and the 80s, because I think I think before, like, maybe that industry became so commercial and what's the word? Just it's became such a huge business. Like, I think right now, like, it lost its charm or something. It's just there's oversaturation of pornography and all these and nudity, and it's numbing. And I think when it was just came about, it was kind of more amateur in like a delightful way. It was like real photographers shooting stuff. It was just more beautiful, and also probably less like lower res. Like right now everything's so HD and kind of gross to me. Like I don't want to see every pore. And also I think, you know, with the sexual revolution, it was this aesthetic of people thinking, okay, cool, now we recognize like women are sexual beings, so like their sexuality is probably the same as men's, like, and they want to see the same stuff that we do, like nudie mags, and like and then like, so it was very clearly for female audience. And I think like I said, I think my theory is that women kind of internalize what I'm calling is slut shaming, this idea of it's not ladylike to look at naked men, it's not ladylike to do all these things, so I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to be a visual person. I'm not going to acknowledge the beauty in men. I don't want to look at hot naked men like, okay, like, I do. And like, again, it's like, so I'm very interested in how women internalize that, because then obviously there wasn't like an audience for it, so then the aesthetic changed, and I like the aesthetic in the late 80s and 90s became more targeted towards gay men, I think, in Playgirls, so it was just, it's not as appealing to me. And also like maybe, I don't know what was happening in the 90s, the body type was very kind of over muscular, kind of
Schwarzenegger kind of influence.
I don't know if that was all across the board that was in, I don't know, but like not for me. And like, and I think I was very interested in the way those men were depicted in the 70s and 80s in Playgirl, and so I painted a few of them that I was just kind of drawn to.
How did the aesthetic change in your estimation between what you found interesting and then when kind of made a turn towards gay men?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's the bodies were kind of like a little more natural and softer, but like still muscular. They weren't perfect. There was body hair. And then I think in the 90s, like I said, they were too ripped. They were like thong tan lines. They were like shaved, and it was just weird. And tanned. Like what? Like so I don't know if, I mean, I think the audience changed in part, but maybe like that was also like the time, the aesthetic of the time. Right now, I don't think there's any really nudie mags specifically for women. And again, like this is, and maybe this is my limited perspective, but I just, again, I think so many of things targeting women are images of other women, and I'm curious about that because it just doesn't that's not that interesting for me personally.
Sure.
So I'm just curious about it. I'm like, why am I not seeing more dudes?
Yeah, I mean, even like I'm friends with a lot of people who are in porn, and even porn for women is often female focused. Like we're actually still gazing at the women in pleasure.
Yeah.
And that's curious to me because like I'm bisexual, so it's like for me I can appreciate a beautiful woman in pleasure, but again I get a lot of that. I'd prefer to like for when I think about porn for women, I think about like what kind of men do I want to look at, and what do they look and sound like when they're in pleasure, which is not something that a camera tends to linger on.
Exactly. Yeah, especially with like women made stuff for women, and I'm just maybe I am like not maybe most people are not like me, I don't know, but it's to me it just seems kind of like a stifled expression that we're not allowed to still have. Maybe we feel like we're not allowed to have.
Yeah. But it is, I find it's, I mean, but it does feel like I've done a lot of, recently I've just been unpacking a lot of my own assumptions about what I actually got from society. Like I like to think I'm all like, deconstruction and like gotten really progressive, but at the same time I certainly run up against my own internalized phobias or distastes, and I'm trying to unpack a lot of that now around like just kind of realigning with my actual authentic sexual attractions as opposed to what society tells me I should. And I'm finding that it's super hard. And it's like I have a moment of like looking up some porn and be like, ooh, and I'm like, well, okay, wait, hold on. Like, what about that is ooh, or what about that is ooh to me? And how can I, like, learn to appreciate that? And maybe some of it is society saying you shouldn't find this attractive. And maybe some of it is just a true organic experience of self. But I think it's worth exploring. Like, I think everybody could probably benefit from kind of deconstructing your desires a little bit.
Totally. And I think, it's aesthetics. It's like, I think there's a lot of conflict in, like, knowing the politically correct thing and the objective thing, and also being like shaped by society and like what we see as a beauty, but also being like an artist and like responding so heavily to aesthetics and being same, like I'm trying to look at the guys too. I'm also like, this is me trying to resolve that I am attracted to a certain thing, and does it have to be right or wrong? Like it's so kind of deeply embedded in all of us for whatever reasons, and I think so often I feel like women are the ones to work on themselves and be like, I should be more open-minded and like all these stuff. And I'm like, well, like, why? Yeah. Like, why do I always do this emotional labor, I don't see men being like, I need to be more open about what I'm attracted to.
Yeah. The good ones are.
What's that?
The good ones are.
Yeah. I mean, where are they,
Yeah.
Would love to know.
Yeah.
But it's, I think it's, again, I'm curious, what other, I guess, women's experiences, but obviously I talk to my friends and stuff about it, but we all have tastes, right? So it's, but I think women don't tend to express them so much, and I wonder why. When it comes to men.
Right.
We're very quick to judge other women, but it's,
So you said you were having a hard time finding men to pose for you. Like, do you have a sense of why that is or how you can overcome that, or?
Well, I recently got a few more men interested. They are gay men, because gay men tend to be a little more open with themselves, which I think will be cool too. I think these two guys happen to be straight. I do think that's an interesting aspect to it. I think it's, straight men seem to be a little more uptight about their bodies. I think they tie their masculinity a little closer to their dicks and like being flaccid, maybe. I don't know. I think a lot of guys have a hard time not eroticizing the situation. I had a guy lined up that was supposed to pose for me, and then he ended up bailing because he said he was still attracted to me, so he couldn't pose for a painting, which seems incredibly unrelated to me. So, it's like, I don't understand, but...
being vulnerable in front of somebody who is staring at you for hours, I guess I could see that being emotionally challenging.
I guess so, but I think... But I don't imagine having that response from a woman, so I don't know.
So interesting, like, I think about this with men that I see, and I will often compliment them on their beauty. And I've had so many times where I've told a man that he's beautiful while we're in bed together, and there's a moment at which, like... this has happened like 2 or 3 times in my recent memory, where it's like they'll have a moment of like immediately wanting to kind of dismiss that or find that funny, but then like, you know, if they trust me and, you know, we're already intimate, like they can feel into it. And like, it's so rare for a man to be called beautiful, but beautiful is not the domain of women by any means. Beautiful is a genderless thing, but so rarely do men get, I mean, men might get called handsome or hot or, you know, studly. A good one, but but
handsome, like you can apply that to both, you think?
I mean, the word handsome traditionally is applied to men, but it's also it's a genderless word. I mean, you can say something is handsome. Yeah, which is
we just made it gendered,
Yeah.
The language is gendered,
Yeah, it's so funny. Because, I guess you think of soft or beautiful and you think of softness and delicacy as opposed to, like, swarthiness and hairiness and rugged. And it's like, I think those things can be beautiful, too. So interesting. Huh. Well, I hope that you find more models.
I hope I found more audience as well.
Fair enough. Speaking of, how can people find your work?
It's on the internet. I have a website. I have an Instagram. A lot of stuff is on there. I feel like my Instagram right now is probably where I upload most recent work, just because it's a lot to update everything all the time.
Sure.
But
What's the name of the Instagram?
My handle is the Rubenstein, and then my website is alexandrarubenstein.com.
Cool. And do you have any shows coming up in the late winter or spring?
It's looking like some in the spring.
Okay.
But I will keep you posted.
Okay, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please do. And I mean, even if this is after this airs, I would love to be able to promote your shows and stuff like that. Yeah. So, awesome. Alexandra, thank you so much. This was a lovely conveation. Anything else you wanted to add before we disappear?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Eat more yogurt, everybody.
Keep that gut
flora. And don't take antibiotics ever.
Awesome. That was great. And that is it for this week's episode of Artgasm. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I would love, love, love it if you would help spread the word. If you liked this episode, tweet about it, share it on Instagram, share it on Facebook, share it wherever you can share things. If you can leave a review, leave a review. And if you would like to continue supporting this podcast, again, this is a labor of love, consider becoming a patron. You can become a patron at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/artgasm. As of today, I am still in the sex ghetto because I have the audacity to talk with intelligent people about sexuality and gender, and apparently that's still a dangerous thing to do on the internet. So if you can support me, that would be great. It would help me because I can't be found if people search for this podcast. You have to go straight to Artgasm, or you have to go straight to patreon.com/artgasm. But if you want to support, I would really appreciate it. And I give special little essays at Patreon, specifically only for my Patreon subscribers. So if you would like to learn more, dive deeper, learn about more interesting things that are on my mind, and be able to engage in conversation with me there, it's a really wonderful thing for me, and it allows me to be able to know who you are as well. So check it out, patreon.com/artgasm. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me. Bye-bye.